Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 211, Acid Proof. Michael immediately signaled Fudge to move in closer to the ailing adventurer. An unsuspecting shadow slithered through the ground without arousing any suspicion, which was easy because everyone's attention was on the adventurer lying helplessly on the grass. Whoa, what happened to him? Another impatient bastard bites the dust. That's why I said we shouldn't go in before the knights arrive. Are you kidding? By the time they arrive, they'll have scooped up any treasure in the tomb. The adventurers got too caught up in their squabble, which allowed Fudge to inhabit the shadow of the fallen man. How is it? Michael asked Fudge. A small bit of the slime's head peeked back up from Michael's shadow, shaking its head. He's gone, master. Michael was going to try and help the unfortunate guy, but he was too late. The man had already used up the last of his remaining life mana to warn the other adventurers of the dangers in the discovered tomb. Clear out, everybody. Give the man some space. A commanding voice from a bald man wearing bulky red armor carved through the nosy adventurers. Now, as a group of rebels, it was in their nature to never take commands from other people. But as they were about to yell at the guy for saying such audacious words, they realized the insignia borne on his right chest plate. Hammerstone Company. The unruly adventurers ended up backing down in front of the 20-something fighters from the 495th ranked Hammerstone Company. They knew they were outclassed just from the clean clink sound of their armor alone. Do we know what happened to him? Asked the bald man, clearly the leader of the whole group. His legs are in terrible shape. It's a miracle he was able to even get out of the tomb. Michael couldn't hold in his curiosity any longer. He turned his entire body into a shadow and glided through the backs of unsuspecting adventurers until he reached a large tree overlooking the whole situation below. Coincidentally, the best view he could get of the whole situation was by hanging onto a branch on the tree directly above the adventurers. I owe the shadow orcs an apology. This is actually quite a stealthy way to eavesdrop on someone. Michael looked down at the corpse below, expecting to see only dark mana permeating the body. But, instead, he also saw large chunks of poison mana on it, specifically the legs. Poison. Chat JK3. Can you find out the cause of death? I have seen traces of some kind of acid present on the corpse. Look at his chest plate, the bald man from Hammerstone said curiously. It's barely scratched. It's the complete opposite of his lower body, which seems to have been eaten through the bone. Some kind of acid or poison maybe. The other experienced adventurers drew their own conclusions, not that much different from the bald man's guess. That means the tomb has an acid section that must be traversed. And this unfortunate soul didn't have any protection at all for it. That's why it's important to have leg armor. Everyone thought that the man foolishly tried to swim through acid with nothing but leather boots and a can-do attitude. Wait, I know him, said one of the adventurers. He did have leg armor on, and it's full-on steel armor as well. If the man's words were to be believed, then this meant that his leg steel armor did nothing to protect him from the acid. That's why he said we need legs or leggings, Michael thought. I'm guessing this acid could permeate through the smallest of crevices in the leg armor, which they didn't anticipate. Michael looked at the bald man and saw his eyes gleam with understanding as well. We know now that to storm the tomb, one must have strong metal leggings to withstand the acid, the bald man said. It didn't take long for the other adventurers to see through the meaning behind his words. Slowly, they began to walk away from the forest with only one thing in mind: searching for the best steel boot leggings money could buy. If they were to get their hands on leggings like that, then it was more than possible that they would be the first ones to get through to the treasure room of the tomb. The problem now would be to find a blacksmith good enough to create such a craft. Michael listened in on the conversation of an adventurer group planning on going back to Angora City to find a blacksmith. Where are we going to find a blacksmith that can create something this fast? How about Hammerstone? Surely they have a lot of metal leggings to sell. Let's buy from them even if we have to pawn off some of our stuff. No. Didn't you see them out here? They don't plan to share the tomb with anybody else. I'm betting that they won't be selling any leggings in Angora City by tomorrow. They'll hoard it for themselves, I guarantee it. After being a good ninja, as Fudge liked to call it, Michael found out that the Hammerstone was a blacksmith company. It made sense, seeing as how well-equipped their fighters were. And he also thought that the adventurers had a point. Hammerstone would definitely keep acid-proof leggings to themselves for this tomb campaign. What should we do, Master? Fudge said, returning to Michael's shadow. As much as I hate to admit it, those scaly meanies can enter the tomb by themselves. It wasn't just the Dragonborns. Michael was sure that any Rebornian could bypass the acid section of the tomb quite easily. They had the lesser unity defense, after all. But Michael wasn't just thinking about the tomb and its treasures. Instead, he was also thinking about a way to spread the Reborn Company and the new Golden Road to a much wider customer base. He reached down into his shadow, letting part of his hand reach Neo-Orcs, as he picked up one of the blueprints for the Golden Road project. As he observed the outskirts of Neo-Orcus on the map, Michael's eyes latched onto the jungle portion of the territory. ChatJK3, use this map as a reference to tell me my exact location. Very well. Scanning your surroundings. Complete. Just then, a small light suddenly appeared on the blueprint, just on the borderline of the paper. That was his current location on the map. Coincidentally enough, the location of the tomb was very near and close to the path of the new Golden Road. Come follow me, Michael said to Fudge. Where are we going? We're taking a little visit back to the parched lands. We need the dwarves' help on this. Michael was planning on becoming the main supplier for the adventurers. This would be a tremendous opportunity for the Reborn Company. He would supply not only acid-proof leggings, but also food, armor, weapons, and other such necessities for the campaign. This would earn him a lot of reputation within the adventuring community. But of course, Michael wasn't planning on just letting the adventurers have the tomb for themselves. While selling the leggings for the adventurers, he was also planning on diving into it himself and getting the treasures inside. It was a double win. Chapter 212, Blacksmith's Accomplishment. In preparation for this whole campaign, Michael visited the blacksmith workshop in the parched lands once again. He was greeted by Thrain and the rest of the ancient dwarves with excited smiles. They almost couldn't contain their excitement as they showed Michael what they had been working on for the past few weeks. Boss, welcome back. You missed a lot when you were gone. Barkus got married, I was able to hit a home run, and we were finally able to solve the mystery of the multi-elemental mithril artifact. Thrain picked up a glowing arm brace from his furnace and shoved it in the water, whistling a satisfying tshhh as its internal temperature shot back down to normal. A few seconds later, Thrain showed Michael the finished product. The uni-elemental mithril artifacts that they had created before, the ones that were only good if they only had one element in them, had the appearance of a glass sculpture with a glowing light in its core. It certainly looked good for wands and other such delicate weapons, but it looked a little bit too brittle for offensive weapons and armor. But now, this multi-elemental mithril artifact looked a little bit more opaque, with a milky white appearance with the frequent red, blue, and yellow glints of light shining through the surface. Fire, water, and earth mana, Michael said, listing off the mana in his body that was reacting crazily from the appearance of the mithril artifact. How did you bypass the need for a transmutation spell? He asked them. We had a little help from the Dwarven Kingdom, boss. Turns out they have an old-school smithing technique that can replicate the effects of a transformation spell. They showed him the technique involving only dwarf-specific skills and unique tools from the very ancient treasure room of the king himself. Michael didn't know why he hadn't thought to ask Byru, the Dwarven King, in the first place. There was a reason why they were renowned for their smithing technique back in the past, and even in the present as well. Congratulations! Looks like we can finally mass-produce these mithril artifacts for the Rebornians. The ancient dwarves shouted their joy, clinking their hammers on their anvils to express their excitement. This new iteration of the mithril artifact, hereby named Ver 2, would be better suited for the Dragonborns and the Shadow Orcs, who mainly used physical art spells in their day-to-day lives. In short, these would benefit the Rebornian fighters tremendously. A mithril artifact Ver 2 only boosted the magic power of spells by 10% or less, which was low compared to the 30% boosted effects of the original version. However, this new version now allowed its users to boost multiple mana cores, not just one. So in truth, they would actually be boosted by about 40 to 50%. Of course, for Rebornians who didn't go out much, like the engineers, the famers, and other production-related jobs, it would be much better for them if they just used the first version of the mithril artifact. That way, they would get a 30% boost in stats and just switch artifacts whenever they needed a new elemental mana boosted. For the Dragonborns and the Shadow Orcs who needed to always be prepared, especially in the upcoming campaign in the tomb, they didn't have the luxury to change artifacts while in the middle of fighting. So, the second version would be much more fitting for them. Our next project is to now create mithril artifact Ver 2 for each Dragonborn and Shadow Orc, Michael said to the dwarves. I'll handle the Dragonborns, you guys do the orcs. Thrain and the others hadn't met the orcs yet, so Michael summoned an Orcanine and Orcupine orc from his shadow and had their measurements taken by the dwarves. While they were working on that, Michael continued working on the armor for the Dragonborns. He had to take into account their personal preferences and their unique powers in creating these customized sets. ChatJK3 planned the best armor set for the Dragonborns. Understood. Creating suitable weapons and armor. Complete. After about a few days of non-stop work, Michael was finally finished with different sets of mithril artifacts. The ancient dwarves couldn't stop praising Michael for his quickness, but in truth, most of the hard work was already done by ChatJK3. He just had to swing the hammer in the correct spot each time. Heck, he didn't even have to swing. Magic was all that was needed. After taking a break, he approached the dwarves and asked them about their other products. Can you make acid-proof leggings? He asked them. The ancient dwarves almost scoffed at the question. Of course, boss. All leggings should be acid-proof, or else they wouldn't even be armor in the first place. Of course, the standards of dwarves were extremely high compared to normal humans. Why do you need it, boss? Michael told them about his plans to sell armor to the adventurers. Thrain scratched his beard, contemplating. We can do it, boss, but it will take time away from making mithril artifacts. The boss Fudge keeps on bugging us about their new ninja outfits. Michael nodded, understanding their concern. These ancient dwarves were way too overqualified for the job, especially for something just to be sold to adventurers. They wouldn't be able to buy even one pair of boots if Michael sold Thrain's handmade crafts. He had to go to the normal blacksmiths of the nation of Reborn. They were good, but not as good as the ancient dwarves whose blood could even be compared with lava. Boss, I hear you want us to make some leggings? A satyr blacksmith approached Michael. Yup. As a matter of fact, those look good, Michael said as he pointed at the armor sets just strewn around haphazardly in the smithy. Are you sure, boss? These are just the rejects from our students. It barely passes as armor. Michael couldn't help but chuckle. Even their reject armor was at least 2 times better than the best armor he saw from the adventurers. These would definitely be enough to satisfy their needs, without it being too pricey for them to not be able to afford. Send all of these armors to Neo-Orcus. All of them, he said to the blacksmiths. It was then quickly arranged for these tons and tons of reject armor to be transported to the Queen's region through the railway. And since this was a request directly from Michael himself, the armors were quickly given VIP treatment and shipped off to the next train leaving the nation of Reborn. Michael arrived back in Neo-Orcus and immediately moved to the Golden Road project. He was gladdened by the progress he saw. The previous crevice-filled, cracked, and degraded stone road was no longer present. It was now replaced by a flat, concrete road leading directly to the horizon. Of course, the work had just barely started, but it was good that they had finally stepped off Neo Orcus and were heading to its next destination. "How's the progress?" he asked the Rebornian engineer. "It's good, boss. I'm guessing that by tomorrow, we can reach the jungle area, just on the outskirts of the tomb." Chapter 213, Reborn Armory. Meanwhile, the campaign for the discovered tomb has been getting more and more traction lately. As Sir John said, the rumor was quickly getting spread through the grapevine, even though the Order was keeping the information under tight wraps. As long as the adventurers smelled even a whiff of money, they would come swarming in, even hungrier than a shark in blood-filled water. However, the progress in the tomb had come to a standstill. After a few more deaths by acid, the adventurers refused to enter without any proper defensive measures. Some returned to Angora City, hoping to be the first ones to purchase leggings from the best blacksmiths. Unfortunately for them, it seemed that the premier armory in the city, owned by the Hammerstone Company, coincidentally suffered a shortage of leggings to sell. It was also a coincidence that their fighting group was showing signs of preparation for the tomb. They were taking advantage of their monopoly in gear to become the first people to explore the tomb. Eventually, some ended up returning to the tomb with nothing but rusted boots and guts of steel. One such group, made of 4 slightly inexperienced adventurers, returned to the tomb with almost no hope left in their name. As no-names, they certainly didn't have any connections to established blacksmiths that would hook them up with acid-proof leggings like some high-class adventurers. After another scream echoed in the jungle that signaled another death in the tomb, the group decided to call it quits and return home. However, when they were about to leave for Angora City, one of them suddenly spotted something out of the corner of his eye. There was a slight glint in his vision. "What's that?" he said loudly to his group, which caught all of their attention. They all turned around and slowly walked over to this strange sight. And lo and behold, they saw something completely out of their expectations. There was actually a small house right here in the middle of the jungle. Huh? Was this always here? The structure was just large enough to be called a home, with a roof and 4 walls. It was bare bones, with no decoration or paint around it. And if it didn't have any sharp edges, they would have thought that it was just a large boulder. They didn't recognize the material. It looked like stone but was way too smooth to be one. Maybe it's part of the tomb? No, it looks modern. And look at that. There's light inside. As they slowly walked over to the front of the house, they finally saw part of its interior through the looking glass beside the double doors. They all looked up at the signage carved in stone. It said, "Reborn Armory." The adventurers couldn't believe their eyes. They would have never expected to see an armory in the middle of nowhere. They had half a mind to consider this as a trap, just like seeing a puddle of water in the desert. They thought that this armory was nothing but a mirage. After all, just when they were wondering where they could get armor from, this building suddenly popped up without any warning at all. Should we come in? What if it's a trap? But look, leggings, armors. They couldn't help but squeeze themselves through the window as they peeked at the goods inside. Ahem. Welcome to our armory. A human woman suddenly opened the door from the inside and greeted the weary adventurers. She gestured for them to come inside with her warm expression and inviting smile. "Boss Michael, we have customers," she shouted back. Michael ascended from the other side of the counter with a smile on his face. Michael oversaw the construction of the Golden Road right until the very edge of the jungle area. There, he instructed the engineers to create a little shop to set up their armory. It was near enough to the tomb so that the adventurers could stumble upon it accidentally, while still being close enough to the Golden Road that they could easily replenish their products through automobile trucks. With Michael's magic, it took barely 2 days for the armory to be completed. It was simple but quaint. With the structure done, he just had to stock up the shipment of Rebornian reject armors inside. Of course, he made sure to add more than just armor. He stocked up on everything an adventurer would need in a campaign, such as rations, tents, torches, bedrolls, and other such equipment. It didn't even take long before their very first customers arrived. "Boss Michael, we have customers." She was a Neo Orcus local who helped him take care of the armory while he was away. Once he heard her voice, He immediately transported himself to the armory to welcome the first customers. "Excuse me," a youthful adventurer said, "but is this really an armory?" "Of course. You can buy anything you need here," he said to them. The adventurers didn't speak anymore and simply just admired all the products hanging on the shelves. They couldn't help but show a face of shock as they saw their reflections from the smooth armor. "I don't even think those fighters from the Hammerstone group have this amazing armor," one of them said. "I can't believe the quality of the swords here. It looks the same as those dwarven equipment in the black markets." They were too amazed at the armor to even question the fact that an 11-year-old boy owned an armory in the middle of the jungle. "Oh my God! Those are steel leggings." One of them finally chanced upon the armor that Michael set up. "Look at the craftsmanship on this. There's no seams. This is acid-proof. We have to get this. This could be our chance to finally break through to the tomb." A palpable excitement spread across the adventurers. They immediately brought out all the gold they had on them and pushed it on the desk. Even though they had to fork up their savings, it was worth it to get these leggings. "Thank you," Michael's attendant said. "Please come again." After the adventurers left, Michael smiled to himself. "Good. Now we just have to wait." A day later, 5 groups of adventurers came inside the Reborn armory. Just like the previous group, they had also stumbled upon this by accident and were curious as to what it was. And when they saw the leggings on sale, they immediately bought them without any consideration. By the second day, there had been rumors that a few groups had been able to cross the acid part of the tomb safely. This became a sensation among the adventurer circles, especially since the people who had successfully journeyed through the acid were no-names. And when they asked around, more people found out about this supposed armory in the middle of the jungle. Of course, most people didn't believe it was true, but when they investigated it themselves, they quickly found out the truth. And so, the Reborn armory slowly gained a reputation from the adventurers. With the Hammerstone Company preventing anyone from buying any legging armor, this was the only place they could obtain one for their campaign. By the 5th day, almost half of the people camping by the tomb were wearing armor with the distinct "Our symbol of the Reborn Company" stamped on its side. Chapter 214, Reborn Armory Advantages. Michael and Fudge both kept on monitoring the situation in the tomb, secretly eavesdropping on the conversations happening all around. It was quite funny that not once did these cautious and experienced adventurers look up at the sky. If they did, then they would see orcs and shadows perched up on the branches, not making any attempt at hiding their humongous bodies. "Where did you get that chest plate? Mine got dented after going through an arrow trap, but yours is squeaky clean. There's barely a scratch." The adventurer wearing armor with the symbol "R" carved on his right chest looked around, hesitating to tell it so publicly. "To tell you the truth, I'm tempted to gatekeep where I got this armor. I don't want it to get sold out so easily. In fact, this is the last armor that was in stock yesterday, so I got lucky. Come on, just tell us." After getting pressured by his friends, the adventurer eventually relented. "Fine. Follow me." Michael watched this kind of scene unfold multiple times just this day already. Slowly, the Reborn armory was getting spread through word of mouth from the adventurers, leading them to discover the workshop. He then looked down on his shadow and said, "Mary, there's going to be some adventurers coming your way. Welcome them, please." He was talking to Mary, the caretaker of the Reborn armory. "All right, boss. I just finished stocking up our wares," she replied, with her voice coming out of Michael's shadow. A couple of minutes later, those adventurers arrived at the Reborn armory, where they were immediately welcomed by a homely-looking woman. "Whoa! Where did this place come from? Look at all these armor and weapons. It's even better than the ones in Angora City. I'll even dare say that this is better than the ones sold by Hammerstone." The adventurer who led his friends into the armory stood there dumbstruck as he looked at the rows and rows of the same chestplate that he had just purchased yesterday. "I don't believe it," he said. Yesterday, this was the last chestplate they had. And as he looked around, he realized that their most popular item being sold, the acid-proof leggings, had already been fully restocked. By the time he got here yesterday, they were all already sold out. Excuse me, miss? How fast do you guys restock? The attendant just smiled and just had one simple explanation for them. It's because we are the Reborn company, she said. The adventurers showed an expression of unfamiliarity. But from now on, the name Reborn would get stuck in their minds. The adventurers quickly bought all the equipment they could afford. Even though the prices were a little steep for their liking, the fact that they could buy it in the first place was already a privilege that they were thankful for. We can't even buy this stuff if we're not a member of the Hammerstone Company. The quality is better too. Whoa! This says that we can create fire just by striking this match. We can finally have a torch anywhere we want. Come on, let's try this out in the tomb. The adventurers left the Reborn armory with their new, glistening armor and equipment. Of course, Fudge sent his clones to monitor the adventurers. From what I hear, the acid portion of the tomb is just the halfway point of the exploration, Michael thought to himself. But thanks to our leggings, people can finally explore further. There were plenty of rooms and caves that had diverging paths, with some leading to a dead end with traps, or some just looping back at the start. It seemed that some of the real pathways led into a big chamber, with nothing but a lake of acid preventing the adventurers from advancing further. Michael even heard that the acid lake had varying degrees of depth, with only one true path being shallow enough for a person to walk through with just their legs getting soaked, hence the need for acid-proof leggings. From the rate of progression of the tomb's exploration, it would probably take another month before the tomb was fully mapped out and the treasure room was discovered. Of course, Michael heard this from the adventurers who heard it from another source, who heard it from the Knights of the Order, so the credibility of the news was still a little bit hazy. But it seemed accurate enough, at least ChatJK3 seemed to think so based on the size of the abnormal earth mana on the ground, which Michael thought to be the whole size of the tomb itself. And from what he could see, the acid room was barely halfway to the end. It was probably the reason why the Knights from the Order hadn't arrived yet. They wanted the adventurers to do all the legwork for them, not risking their lives and letting others map out the tomb. But as a consolation prize, these adventurers did find some treasures here and there that made it all worth it. "Oh look, Master," Fudge said as he pointed in the distance. "There's a group of adventurers returning from the tomb. Their armor is toast." Michael watched as the disappointed adventurers limped out of the mouth of the cave, with their weapons and armor chipped and dented. "Damn. We're going to have to return to Angora City to resupply. It'll take us a week to return here. Maybe it'll all be too late by then. We can't fight for the main treasure room, but I thought we'd at least get some from the other rooms." Just then, they were approached by a female adventurer. She pointed at the R symbol on her chest plate, and then pointed towards the jungle, where the Reborn armory was located. Michael didn't even have to listen to their conversation to know what happened. Word of mouth once again did its work. About half an hour later, those same adventurers returned to the mouth of the cave with entirely new weapons and armor, as well as a couple of new hiking and exploring equipment which all had the R symbol printed on it. This was how the Reborn armory became the premier store for these adventurers. Not only was the quality good, but it was also placed extremely close to the tomb, saving them a lot of time and effort. The fact that they could restock their inventory in just a single day was also incredibly impressive, causing the adventurers to wonder if they had some sort of pocket dimension hidden somewhere in the armory. Of course, it was all thanks to the automobiles coming from Neo-Orcus via the newly constructed Golden Road, which no company could even hold a candle to. A day later, the gossip and conversations from the adventurers in their camps became alit with new topics. The Hammerstone Company adventurers finally returned to the tomb. They had just returned from Angora City after the whole acid incident, and they expected the tomb to be a lot less populated because of the lack of acid-proof leggings. But they were quickly stunned by the fact that almost all the adventurers, whether they be no-names or not, were fully equipped with new armor and weapon sets. Not only that, but the tomb had been explored much further than the acid lake portion. They were actually behind in progression. Chapter 215, Tomb's Final Call. "Master, you should have seen the look on their faces," Fudge said, telling the story to Michael about how the Hammerstone group was completely caught off guard by the current events. "Tell it to Master," Narito and Sasuke. The former Orcanine and Orcupine chieftain ascended from the shadows and showed themselves to Michael. Fudge took it upon himself to name the two dignified chieftains as Narito and Sasuke, which was extremely similar to the anime characters in his previous life. The orcs didn't mind it at all and embraced their new name. After all, they had no name back when they were unevolved. They simply referred to each other through the unique sound they produced from their bodies. The Orcanines slapped their thighs, and the Orcanines strummed their quills. Butch, the leader of the Hammerstone group, had his people investigate the cause and found our armory, reported Narito, the Orcanine chief. Ahem, you were leaving a lot of stuff out, said Sasuke, the Orcupine chief, with a competitive spite. He already sent out a messenger to deliver the news back to Angora City. I had my subordinates follow their shadows and find out more. I wasn't done talking, Narito grunted. I was just about to report that to our boss. Why do you always undermine me? I wasn't. I was making sure that our boss got the truth. It is simply your pride thinking that. Michael had to appease the two from bickering any further. So, what did the Hammerstone company do? They're planning on competing with us by allowing their customers to buy their acid-proof leggings again. They tried to keep it for themselves, but seeing as everyone is buying leggings from us, they quickly changed their tactics. Fudge was quite proud of what the Reborn armory was able to do. According to our ninja orcs, they are also planning on establishing a temporary armory in the jungle. They are building it now as we speak, Narito said. True enough, a couple of days later, Michael took a look for himself and saw a makeshift wooden cabin on the opposite side of the Reborn armory. It had the insignia of the Hammerstone Company, manned by their employees. It was shabby and devoid of any decorations due to how rushed they had to build it, but it did its job. It displayed all the available Hammerstone armor and weapon sets anyone can purchase. However, they found that business was a little bit slower than they were expecting. No one was buying from their stall. This was all because the adventurers had gotten used to buying and using Reborn products. In short, they were too late. Not only that, but their quality was a little bit lesser than that of the Reborn armory while still being a lot more expensive. Butch, the bald leader of the Hammerstone adventurers who wore the fiery red armor set, had to lower the prices a lot to compete with the Reborn armory. They slashed it by about 40%, making it cheaper than the Reborn products. This led them to finally gain customers. As the exploration in the tomb progressed further and further, the traps and dangers increased, leading to more wrecked armor needing to be replaced. Conversely, the treasures found within became even more and more valuable, which tempted more explorers despite the increased risk. This led to a boom in new adventurers coming in from different territories, who all needed proper equipment to brave the tomb. Due to this, the makeshift Hammerstone Armory store found a problem. Their supply wasn't keeping up with the demand. Their wares would get sold out not even a day after they resupplied. Normally, this would be a cause for celebration for them. However, this meant that they were losing out on a lot of customers willing to spend all their gold coins in this campaign. All those disappointed people who left their armory empty-handed went over to the opposite side of the tomb, to their competitor, the Reborn Armory. And somehow, that company never experienced this kind of problem at all. They were always filled with supplies despite having 20 adventurers buying acid-proof leggings every day. Where did this company come from? They resupply their products too fast. The Hammerstone adventurers looked over the map of the Queen's region and found no city anywhere near the tomb. The closest was Angora City. Maybe they come from this place, Orcus Town, someone said, pointing at the edge of the Queen's region. I heard that place is a ghost town, ruined beyond repair. And even if they are from there, it will take at least a week to resupply their wares. They must be super close to be able to refresh their stock so fast. Butch had to calm his subordinates down. This is fine, he said to them in a commanding voice. We are not here to sell armor and weapons. We are here to explore the tomb in its entirety. Our bosses need us to be the first ones to complete the tomb so that our company gets published in the newspapers. If we do, we can finally break through and achieve that 494th spot. Nearly a month after the acid incident, The tomb had now been explored by about 90%. There were a couple of fortunate adventurers who discovered a hidden treasure room, but no gemstone or gold bars could compare to the ultimate prize at the end of the final door to the tomb. This was when the Order of the Heavenly Knights finally sent in their own group of adventurers. Everyone in camp was awoken by the sound of clinking and clanking as 10 or so full-armored knights came into the entrance of the cave. Whoa! They sent in no squires. This is serious. That means they are all 4-star fighters at the minimum. Look, that's Sir John. He's a 5-star knight. This signaled to the adventurers that the campaign for the tomb was nearing its closure. Now that the knights had appeared, they were sure to complete the exploration of the tomb by tomorrow at the latest. If anyone wanted to join the campaign, then this would be the last chance they would get. So, a lot of adventurers gathered at the mouth of the cave, just behind the knights led by Sir John. Of course, most of these adventurers knew that they would probably not get anything valuable from the main treasure room. After all, they were competing with the knights as well as the Hammerstone group, who held their own against the best. Who do you think will be the eventual winner? I'm betting on Sir John. He's a knight. Here you are again being a mega fan of the Order. I think it's going to be the Hammerstone Company. Did you know that their leader Butch has a secret weapon? I heard that his gauntlets have a small piece of mithril relic embedded inside. Please. It's not all about strength, you know. The tomb could still have some tricks and traps up its sleeve. I think that the 4-star Infernal Adventurers or the 3-star Bears group will have the best shot at getting to the treasure room. They have the most experience with this sort of stuff. While most of these adventurers were debating with each other, a completely unfamiliar group arrived from the back made up of one 11-year-old child and 4 dragon-like individuals. Chapter 216. Exploring the Tomb. Michael initially wanted to explore the tomb by himself, but of course, Shiina had to intervene and invited themselves on this campaign as well. Now, this whole exploration of the tomb became some sort of field trip for the siblings. Despite the inherent dangers and risks that they would face in the tomb, the Dragonborns treated it as nothing more than light work. And it was not without merit. Their fighting techniques had improved far beyond normal after months of training with Agnes. And so, Michael and the Dragonborns arrived on the mouth of the cave along with about 100 or more adventurers waiting as well. Just like others, they waited behind the group of knights in the front line. As the knights moved, the adventurers moved as well. Even though Michael had spent about a month focused on this campaign, he had yet to see it with his own eyes. This would be the first. The very entrance of the cave looked like it was born from the ruins of a once great civilization. Michael compared it to the Mayan infrastructures back in his previous life that had sunk deep into the ground. It was mostly made out of stone bricks, which used to hold such great architecture but was now filled with moss and grass. The whole tomb itself was underground. Michael suspected that the original tomb had been swallowed up by a large crevice on the ground due to the intense earthquakes throughout the years. The fact that the broken structures littered on the ground were reminiscent of roofs gave more credence to that theory. Michael and the Dragonborns followed the adventurers inside and saw a large open cave structure, which was a mix of stalactites and stone bricks fused together. The whole cavern was lit up by the torches of the adventurers, letting Michael see the broken statues and pillars on the ground. Fudge! What kind of tomb is this? The violet slime dripped down from the stalactites above and landed on Michael's head. I heard that it's the resting place of a renowned general of some kind. Michael believed that since it would explain why the Knights of the Order were so interested in the tomb in the first place. As they advanced further down the cavern, the whole structure narrowed down and forced them to choose between 10 different openings. The right choice had already been marked by the previous adventurers, so everyone easily passed the first trap. This made the tomb relatively safe, which made the Dragonborns a little bored. Even Shiina, who was always serious, ended up sharpening her arrows while walking. Jaku, the eldest of the bunch, couldn't help but yawn and drag his feet on the cracked stone brick flooring as he followed the adventurers. Amisu, on the other hand, let herself fall behind because she was incredibly shy from all the adventures in front of her. Meanwhile, Zion was the complete opposite. The energetic little Dragonborn couldn't help but catch up to some of the adventurers up in front of and chat with them. He began to bombard the adventurers with a lot of questions about their previous experiences and their hardships from before. And the tunnel they were going through wasn't that big, so his voice was booming and echoing through the whole pathway. It was only now that some of the adventurers noticed Michael's peculiar group. Michael could see that the adventurers were a little bit confused as they looked at their group. First of all, they had never seen a dragonborn before, and secondly, they didn't expect to see a child accompanying them as well. It finally came to a point where one of them had to ask, "Excuse me, who are you?" Zion smiled and proudly announced, "I am Zion, and we are from the nation of Reborn." His answer was met with a lot of blank faces as they tried their hardest to recall their geography classes. But no matter how hard they tried, they had never heard of this nation before. Wait, Reborn? Why does that sound familiar? It was only when the adventurer looked down at his chest, with the intricate R symbol imprinted on it, that he finally connected the dots. Reborn Armory? Do you guys own that? HM? Oh yeah, our boss owns that, Zion said as he pointed to the golden-haired kid walking behind. The adventurers who overheard their conversation ended up stopping right in the middle of the winding stone brick tunnels, creating a traffic jam. Reborn Armory? You guys are the one to thank for saving my life? If it weren't for this helmet, my head would have been skewered by now. Me too. And it's also thanks to their matchsticks that I was able to survive the cold night when I got stranded in one of the rooms. Hey, tell me how you guys create these armors so fast. It's as if you just magic their existence. Michael and the Dragonborns were swarmed with these curious adventurers. They asked all sorts of questions about the Reborn company and how impressed they were at their smithing capabilities. Of course, these people thought that they were purely a smithing business like the Hammerstone company. So, Shiina had to explain to them that it was just one part of their product line. This led them to bombard them with even more questions. But Shiina wasn't entertaining any of them until they continued to walk further, or else they were getting completely left behind. And so, as they continued to progress through the tomb, some of the adventurers finally noticed the abnormal physical abilities of the Dragonborns. They jumped through pitfalls with barely no effort. They showed no care as arrows shot past their faces from hidden wall traps, and they were doing all of that while conversing with each other like they were just walking through normal ground. Who are these people? They're stronger than they look. What do you think, 3-star fighters? I think they're 4-star fighters. Either way, how did the Reborn company get these elite fighters from out of nowhere? I've never even seen their species before. The adventurers were even more surprised as they reached the acid lake portion of the tomb. Most of the experienced explorers carefully followed the one before them, wading through the acid with their legs fully submerged under it. They stepped carefully, making sure to never walk a step away from the established path, or else they would risk sinking into their death. However, as the Dragonborns entered the water, a prismatic shield suddenly manifested around them and allowed them to essentially walk over the whole lake. The acid tried to eat through the shield, but there was some sort of magical property within it that destroyed the acid entirely as it tried to push through. What the hell? What kind of defensive spell is that? Is their armor magical? I'm super envious. That's gotta be a secret defensive spell from their company. Where did this Reborn come from, and why are they so powerful? And the supposed leader of this company, the 11-year-old boy with blonde hair, simply floated in the air and bypassed the lake entirely. A 4-star spell. Just like that. Chapter 217, Final Double Doors. After journeying for hours and hours into the tomb, ducking through semi-collapsed terrain, squeezing through tight walls, and even jumping 3 meters across a black abyss, the whole adventurer group finally arrived at the supposed last room of the tomb. They knew that this was the last obstacle from the treasure room because the large, gigantic, double doors were intricately carved with depictions of a man's heroic triumph against a whole army of monsters. This is it. General Grievous' final resting place. Sir John's words were directly transmitted to Michael's shadow, courtesy of none other than Fudge, the good ninja. Meanwhile, another voice came through the shadows. This time, the voice was more commanding. It was Butch, the leader of the Hammerstone adventurers. Remember, we care not for the treasures inside, but the triumph of its first exploration. The Hammerstone Group's reputation rests solely on our shoulders. We shall make them proud. Fudge had eyes and ears everywhere inside the tomb, allowing Michael to hear everyone's strategies and preparations for the upcoming final door. This was a little bit strange for Michael to hear because he thought that everyone would push themselves to try and be the first ones to open the door. Yet from the look on their faces, it seemed like they were all hesitant to be the first ones in. "Oh look, Master! All the leaders are gathering in one spot." Sir John, the representative of the knights, took charge and gathered all of the other large names in the group. Butch joined him, as well as two other leaders from the most prominent adventuring groups in the campaign, the Infernal Adventurers and the Bears Group. These four leaders talked amongst each other and planned their respective roles in the upcoming event. Shiina walked up to Michael. "Shall I insist that you be included in their meeting, Lord Michael? It is only fair." She sounded a bit upset at the others for neglecting to include Michael, as if they knew he was even here in the first place. "It's fine," he said. "I don't want to interfere in their plans. After all, I've got plans of my own." Michael scanned the whole chamber, with his normal eyes seeing stone brick walls swallowed up by mud and soil. It looked like everything was normal. Yet, with his supreme sensitivity to mana, Michael was sensing that there was some sort of spell hidden inside this very chamber itself. All he should be seeing was earth mana randomly present in the walls, but curiously, he saw unnatural crystallized formations that should not be naturally made. Someone manipulated the walls of the chamber to make it look like a normal room. ChatJK3, can you decipher the magic theory behind this mystery? Michael even went to the wall and physically touched the recessed stone brick wall, feeling the wetness of the moss growing on its cracks. Certainly did feel real, yet Michael knew it was all an illusion. The result of the abnormality in mana is due to the effects of a high-star magic spell casted 1,000 years ago. It will take approximately 10 hours to analyze the structure. Progress? 0.1%. Meanwhile, as ChatJK3 examined the abnormality within the room, the four leaders began their discussion. Michael listened to their conversation through Fudge. In short, the reason why they were all hesitant in opening the final door was because they were expecting monsters to welcome them inside. It had been known through different expeditions of ancient-era tombs that the final door to the treasure room was guarded by creatures of varying degrees of difficulty. Nobody knew if these creatures were purposefully placed there by its creator in order to deter any grave robbers, or they were just naturally occurring monsters born from the bountiful mana present inside. Either way, they were not something that a single adventuring party could fight alone. Sir John expected there to be 4 high-level monsters hiding inside. He shared this guess with the other leaders and hoped that each of their parties would deal with one monster. Whoever finished their monster the fastest would be able to reach the treasure room first. It was an equal responsibility for all, so this decision was quickly accepted. Even the normal adventurers who just tagged along with the 4 big groups accepted the fact that they would never be able to compete with them. They would have to be satisfied with fighting off the small fry monsters and harvesting their materials. After about an hour of preparation, Sir John finally pushed the double doors. It only took a slight bit of force before the whole thing swung wide open, revealing the hidden creatures lurking on the inside. Red eyes flashed in the darkness of the room as large jaguar-like monsters pounced towards the adventurers, snarling their sharp black teeth to the rude humans who awakened their sleep. These monsters were large, about the size of an adult elephant, with tusks not that much smaller than that of a woolly mammoth. Their bodies radiated necrotic energy, as their whole bodies looked to be on the brink of decay. Their gray and black bodies blended well with the dim lighting of the tomb, almost making them disappear into the darkness, if not for their shining red eyes always staring at the small humans. The knights and the adventurers readied their weapons and cast their defensive spells. Everyone had put on a serious face, except for a few dragonborn on the back who shouted "WO" in excitement. As they planned from the start, Sir John and his medley of knights took on one of the large undead jaguars. He did not hold back as he used a 5-star physical art spell called Mountain Crushing Axe, cleaving a large part of the monster's shoulder. The rest of his knights followed suit, brandishing their swords and distracting the jaguar while the rest attacked with coordinated moves. Their well-practiced teamwork allowed them to systematically dismantle the giant undead jaguar. Whoa! As expected of Sir John. That's the reason why he's one of the best. Damn. I wish I was a knight. Their spells are so cool. I want to know the way of the axe too. But look. They're not the only ones showing off. On the other side, Butch and the rest of his Hammerstone comrades fought their monster using their advantage in equipment. They may not be as coordinated as the knights, but they could take a hell of a lot more beating, especially with the fiery armory sets they were all wearing. Butch, in particular, bullied the monster through an unrelenting barrage of punches. With every connected hit, his gauntlets glowed with a red aura, making the giant undead jaguar flinch in pain. I told you his gauntlets were special. It has a mithril relic embedded in it. I promise you. Damn. I'm envious of them too. I guess that's one of the perks of being a subcompany of the Hephaestus group. The other two adventuring groups held their own against their undead jaguars, but they were clearly a step below the knights and the Hammerstones. But as they were all distracted, a pair of red lights suddenly emerged from the dark room past the double doors. Another creature came out of the shadows. And this one was bigger and badder than the rest of the monsters. Chapter 218, Apex Jaguar. An apex jaguar sauntered out of the shadows, with its eyes showing clarity unlike that of the other mindless beasts. It scanned the humans, calculating its next victim carefully. Panic and dread immediately set in the chamber. This new monster was probably at the peak of 6-star difficulty, just a half step below the 7-star realm. The 4 strongest adventurer groups were already preoccupied with their own undead jaguars. Sir John was distracted for a second, allowing one of the jaguars to cleave a large gash on his chest with its claws. But thanks to his armor, it was barely nothing more than a flesh wound. It took the combined power and cooperation of the knights to keep the jaguar occupied. They didn't have the luxury to help anyone else but themselves. Even Butch and his Hammerstone group fighters felt the pressure increase in the chamber. Although they had superior numbers, they didn't have coordination like the knights. He could feel some of his teammates losing focus and letting their fear take over their bodies. The 2 other adventurer groups dealing with the jaguar had no leeway for help either. This meant that the apex jaguar was free to do as it pleased with no one to keep it in check. Even though there were about 100 other adventurers present in the room, their combined strength could not fight against a monster of this caliber. It would have been possible if they had practiced for this, but their lack of coordination would prevent them from defending just one lunge from the apex jaguar. It would slowly whittle their numbers down, eventually killing them all. Some of the adventurers already had their bodies half-turned towards the exit, with their minds just one push away from fleeing for their own safety. They would be safer with larger numbers, which was the cardinal rule as adventurers, but their fear of the jaguar blinded them from recognizing this fact. "Oh, can I play with this cat?" A relaxed voice echoed in the chamber, even catching the attention of the apex jaguar. It was Zion, who began punching the air in excitement. He looked at the apex jaguar not as a monster, but as a punching bag ready to take his strongest attacks. "Zion, don't be rude. We don't know what Lord Michael wants to do," Shiina said, walking over to her younger brother and smacking his head. "Just make sure to finish it off. I don't want to clean up after you," Jaka said, with his hands on his head casually. Everyone is looking at us," Omisu said, hiding behind her big brother Jaku. While everyone was frightened to their wits, these newcomers were walking and talking casually as if they were not dealing with a 6-star difficulty monster. "Who are they?" "Oh, that's the guys from the Reborn company." Butch and the Hammerstone adventurers had to turn their heads, finally putting a face at the company that had been putting theirs into the dirt. They eyed the Dragonborns, gauging their strength as a comparison. One of them held up a monocle to his eye and gazed at the Dragonborns. In his vision, he saw 3 floating lights hovering in each of their stomachs, signaling that they were in the 3-star realm. He whispered his findings to Butch, who eyed the Dragonborns with even more confusion. Their attitude and casualness of the whole situation made it seem like they were a lot stronger than that. "They're only 3 stars. I'm afraid they won't be able to deal with the apex jaguar by themselves. Should we help them?" "How?" We can barely deal with the jaguar in front of us. Butch raised his gauntlets and used a 5-star spell called Erupting Lava Fist, as the jaguar showed a vulnerability after failing to claw their shielded tank. A fiery red aura engulfed his arm, empowering it enough to allow him to punch the jaguar into the stone brick walls, stunning it for a moment. Meanwhile, the apex jaguar finally made its move. Its body turned into a mist, before reappearing right in the middle of a group of adventurers. Its claws ripped the ground and created a shockwave that sent a couple of adventurers flying into the air. As they came falling back down, they thought they were done for. But before their bodies slammed on the ground, their shadows grabbed a hold and softened the impact. Zion looked back at Shiina with impatience. Look! Look! Shiina turned to Michael, who was busy deciphering the mana in the walls. Lord Michael, may we have permission to use our powers? She asked him. Go, he said to them. And with his explicit consent, Zion finally rushed towards the apex jaguar, introducing himself with a punch right through its temple. The jaguar saw nothing but a blur as Zion jumped. It could do nothing as it felt a skull-crushing force on its head. The apex jaguar snarled, opening its jaws and chomped towards Zion as he fell to the ground. The youngest dragonborn smiled and punched its tusk, producing a shockwave that pushed both of them away from each other. Everyone who watched this scene unfold couldn't believe their eyes. This dragonborn was fighting toe-to-toe with the apex jaguar, exchanging blows while barely incurring a scratch. The apex jaguar's eyes glinted in surprise. It didn't think that such a small creature could keep up with its attacks so easily. As it looked at the taunting punches of Zion, the apex jaguar's posture changed into one of seriousness. It bent its body low, with the ground cracking under its feet. Oh, getting serious, are we? Zion teased. Necrotic energy gathered on the apex jaguar's feet, imbuing it with the strength of a 6-star magic power. It intended to skewer the annoying little fly in front of her. But before it could lunge at Zion, a single arrow flew through the air and struck its shoulder, interrupting its spell. The bluish-green energy in its paws flickered before disappearing. It snarled at Shiina, who calmly took out another arrow from her quiver and kept it aimed at the jaguar. The 6-star monster, angry at these new pests, ripped out the arrow from its body before using its claws to lunge at Shiina. Ting! Before its sharp talons could rip through the female dragonborn, the jaguar's paws were stopped in the middle of the air. It was only when it looked down did it finally notice Jakku, who had his blades drawn and clashed with its claws. The jaguar didn't even see him arrive. It retracted its claws and turned around, now using its tail to sweep the dragonborns away into the wall. But unfortunately for the jaguar, Umisu was already there with her spear, thrusting its tip towards the tail and deflecting it away from them. The apex jaguar had to retreat for a second as it assessed its situation. Its eyes showed confusion as it never once thought that there was anyone in the chamber who could contend with its claws. Yet it was proven wrong. These dragonborns showed their prowess. The adventurers couldn't help but stare at the backs of the dragonborns with amazement. And there was only one thought in their mind. Where did these reborn people come from? Chapter 219. Equipping Mithril Artifacts. 5 groups of adventurers were each fighting against an undead jaguar of their own. All of them were established groups. The knights came from the Order of the Heavenly Knights, known for their mastery over all the known weapons. The Hammerstone Company was renowned for their weapons, armors, and equipment. Not only that, but they were considered to be a sub-company of the Hephaestus Group, a conglomerate on the same level as the Vanderbilt business. The Infernal Adventurers and the Bears Group were all part of guilds famous for their exploits all around Queen's region. In short, nobody was surprised that they could contend with a 6-star undead monster like the Jaguars. However, nobody expected the physical dominance that these Dragonborns were showing right now. The fact that they could go toe-to-toe with the Jaguars showed that this unknown Reborn company was powerful in their own right. And it wasn't just a normal Jaguar. It was an apex jaguar, the leader of the pack. Their unique powers and skills were keeping this beast subdued, parrying its terrifyingly sharp claws and keeping up with its lightning-fast lunges. Sure, one could argue that these jaguars were not real 6-star difficulty monsters due to them being undead. Therefore they were not at the peak of their physical power, but their magical ability was not in the least bit degraded at all. This meant that although its physical power was realistically only in the 4-star realm, its magical power was still in the 6-star realm. Even Sir John won't survive being hit by a 6-star necrotic spell head-on. The fact that these unknown demihumans from the Reborn company clashed with the apex undead jaguar meant that they were the undisputed strongest group amongst the entire adventuring campaign. Ugh! This cat is pretty strong, Zion said as he ducked under the apex jaguar's claws. He tried to punch its head again, but the monster turned into mist and disappeared. His punch ended up creating a shockwave in the air, but hitting nothing else. Focus. We're slowly cutting away its life mana. Shiina shot another arrow towards the jaguar, this time hitting its hind leg. But the monster barely flinched and retaliated by slamming its paws towards her. Jaku's sword blurred as he drew it from his scabbard, parrying the jaguar's claws. I agree. This is too slow, he said. I'm trying my best. Umisu swung her spear and slammed its end on the ground, using the momentum to jump kick the jaguar's ribs. Bro Mike, can we use our new artifacts? Michael had been watching the Dragonborns fight the apex jaguar. ChatJK3, do you think they can beat the jaguar like this? It is possible with their current strength. However, the longer the fight goes on, the higher the chance that the jaguar can regain the advantage. It is advised for the Dragonborns to use their mithril artifacts. Progress to analyzation. 59%. Michael looked at Shiina and gave her a subtle nod. Zion saw this and excitedly reached for his own shadow. Shiina, Jaku, and Umisu followed suit as they took advantage of the Orc Shadow's abilities to retrieve their newly created mithril artifacts from the nation of Reborn. A pair of black gauntlets with glowing violet cracks ascended from the shadows in front of Zion. The youngest Dragonborn didn't wait any longer and put on his new mithril artifacts. The unity mana in his body coursed with excitement, increasing his strength even further than before. And as the rest of the Dragonborns wielded their mithril artifacts, there was a subtle change in the air. It was faint but palpable. The apex jaguar's eyes narrowed as it looked at the Dragonborns. It wasn't just fear in those eyes. It was recognition. Back when it was alive, it witnessed the power of mithril artifacts in its entirety. And the fact that weapons like these appeared in front of its eyes again made its undead heart quiver in fear. The other jaguars felt the change as well. Their tails lowered, wary of the mithril artifacts wielded by the Dragonborns. And in some way, every other adventurer knew that the Dragonborns had achieved a power even greater than before. They didn't recognize these mithril artifacts, but they felt its power. Zion's gauntlets distorted space itself, as his natural talents began to manifest itself even stronger through the magnification effect of the mithril. Jaku's sword crackled with lightning. Umisu's spear made the winds move. Shina's bow emanated an ever-seeing light that illuminated even the darkest of shadows. What are those weapons? Is that even a metal? Why is it glowing? Sir John and the knights eyed the mithril artifacts with surprise. They recognized it, but they could hardly believe it. They had only felt this kind of power when they visited the headquarters of the Order and saw the Heavenly Knights for themselves. They knew that those weapons held mithril relics. They were sure of it. No one was more sure of that than Butch. After all, he also held a fractured version of a mithril relic in his gauntlets. It was what gave him the power to launch punches with the eruption of volcanoes. It was a precious gift given to him by the Hephaestos group. He thought he was the most fortunate man in the world for receiving it. Yet, when he saw the mithril artifacts worn by the Dragonborns, he knew that theirs were much stronger than his own. Of course, all of them thought that those weapons held pieces of mithril relics. They didn't know that everything was made out of mithril artifacts. And with the power of the mithril artifacts, Zion and his siblings began unleashing the power of their skills to the apex jaguar. Zion punched the air, breaking the very space itself, letting the power of his fist reach the monster's face even though they were tens of meters away from each other. the jaguar felt its jaws break from the punch. And before it could even recover, Jaku jumped up and released the sword from his scabbard. Before anyone could even see anything, he put the sword back in its scabbard as if he had not yet done anything. And as he landed on the ground, hundreds of large gashes and cuts appeared around the jaguar's body. "Growl!" it screamed. It used its tail to reposition itself in the air, with its legs scratching the ground. Its jaws hung loosely in its head. Just then, Shiina released her arrow. The apex jaguar jumped out of the way, using all of its speed and strength to evade. It was no longer underestimating these dragonborns. But it still did. The arrow struck its neck cleanly. The arrow seemed to have predicted where the jaguar was going to go and struck it in its perfect spot. And before it could even patch itself up, Umisu finally finished her preparations. She had been swinging her spear this entire time, gathering momentum in her body. And each time she used her spear, wind energy began to pick up around its handle, empowering her strength even more. And as the jaguar felt incapacitated due to the arrow stuck in its neck, Umisu finally released the power in her spear. With a single thrust, an invisible cone of destruction appeared and struck the apex jaguar straight in its body, propelling it to the stone brick walls. Chapter 220, Necrotic Energy. As the apex jaguar crashed onto the stone brick walls, Michael felt the crystallized earth mana in the area destabilize for a second. This is a chance, Chat JK3. The defensive measures set by the person who created this tomb was disabled for a split second. The chamber shimmered imperceptibly for normal people who didn't have an insane mana sensitivity. But for Michael, it was enough for him to peek through the curtain and partially see the mechanism hidden inside. This was definitely enough time for his personal AI assistant to rush its analysis. Understood. Analyzing the mana composition of the tomb. Progress, 60%. Progress, 74%. Progress, 89%. Progress, 99%. Information washed over Michael, detailing the very structure of the tomb itself. He saw purpose in the crystallized earth mana around the walls. It acted not just as a containment facility for the tomb, but also some sort of battery for the undead monsters living inside. Beyond the wall of earth mana, Michael saw complicated dark mana pillars pointed directly downwards, slowly spilling out the sustenance needed by the undead creatures. This gave him insight into the inner workings on what made undead creatures possible. He made a mental note to himself, memorizing the very structure of dark mana in the jaguars for the possibility of one day creating one for himself. Of course, that wasn't his goal at this moment. The very reason why he wanted to analyze the crystalline earth mana walls was because he knew that there was a hidden room within it that could lead him into the secrets of the tomb itself. After all, the double doors that everyone thought led to the treasure room was nothing more than an empty space used by the undead jaguars to hibernate. Michael looked beyond the shadows and saw nothing but layers of the earth's crust, meaning that there was no treasure room beyond it. This must mean that the treasure room was hidden somewhere else. And he had a feeling that the strange mana around in this chamber could lead him to find this very room for himself. As Michael finished the analysis of the mysteries of the tomb, the apex jaguar was finally in its last legs. Its eyes were still aching for a fight, but its body failed to keep up. The dragonborns had successfully subdued the undead monster. Its jaws finally dropped to the ground, courtesy of Zion's space-breaking punch. It could not even stand up as Shina's arrow hit its spine, crippling its very torso. It was only possible due to the sliver of light mana embedded in the arrow, disabling the dark mana that allowed it to move. Its body was cut and destroyed due to Jaku and Umisu's constant blows, battering it into the walls. The apex jaguar looked at the dragonborns for one last time, raising its head in defiance. Then, it started to glow with a bluish-green light, necrotic energy filling the chamber in a mere second. The four other jaguars, injured and battered from the adventurers, stopped in the middle of the fight and stared at the glowing apex jaguar. Their red eyes slowly lost its light, before the very dark mana composing their body started to dissipate and merge with their leader. It only took a few seconds before their body was devoid of dark mana, turning their undead bodies into mere ashes and bone that scattered in the wind. The adventurers, still reeling from the Dragonborn's amazing show of prowess, were caught off guard and just stared at the intensely glowing apex jaguar. "What is that? What's happening?" The only person who knew this answer was Sir John, from the Order of the Heavenly Knights. His face was one of worry and panic, with his eyes showing that he recognized this increasing intensity of the bluish-green light. "Retreat!" he screamed at the top of his lungs. "It's a bomb!" The adventurers broke out in a panic, desperate to leave this chamber. The Dragonborns were the only ones who didn't worry. Their shadows morphed and formed into an orc, who offered to transport them back in the Neo-Orcus for safety. However, they refused, seeing as Michael was still busy inside. Sir John and his knights ran towards Michael, recognizing him from before. "Young man, we have to run now," he said. But Michael shook his head. "It's fine. I have it under control." Before the knight could even question Michael, the 11-year-old boy manipulated the air mana in his feet to lift him towards the glowing apex jaguar. He looked at its body and visually dissected its necrotic energy. He saw 2 elemental mana making up the monster's body, dark and poison. "So that's how you make necrotic energy," Michael thought to himself, taking notes even at this unfortunate timing. He then wondered why it was threatening to explode now, when it showed no sign of it before. As he looked further beyond the apex jaguar's body, he saw another weird combination of mana slowly seeping into the undead monster. There was also light and lightning mana. Light mana cancelled out dark mana. Lightning mana cancelled out poison mana. So, in theory, it should have simply disintegrated the very necrotic energy powering the apex jaguar and turned it into nothing but dust and bones like its other comrades. But as it turned out,
light mana complemented poison mana,
and lightning mana complemented dark mana. The combination of all 4 mana created a constructive and destructive mixture that was similar to the first Unity Mithril artifact Michael created, which turned out to be a volatile bomb. This was the reason why the apex jaguar was mere moments away from exploding. The rest of the adventurers couldn't help but look up at Michael, wondering why a boy so young was moving closer to the bomb. They all recognized him to be part of the Reborn company, but few knew that he was the owner. Sir John, in particular, knew Michael to be a talented business owner but nothing more. He never even expected Michael to know the 4-star spell Air Flight, but here he was casting it so casually. Michael raised his hand, with the power of his supreme skill, Unity Gathering coursing at full power. "Separate," he said to the mana. He had complete control not only with his own mana, but everything around him as well. Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.